Okay, so we're going to carry on looking at our population with looking at the future of population. So we talked about controls and overpopulation. So now we're going to move on to looking at what are the potential futures of population. So there are a few things that affect population predictions, specifically three of any country, and that's our total fertility rate. More births obviously equals more higher population, the life expectancy in the country. So the longer you live, the greater the population is going to be, and the impact of migration on population. So more immigrants, less immigrants equals more population increase. So this is kind of the three major things, pretty straightforward, that would affect the population. And some of them are more difficult to predict than others. Some make sense and some can be difficult to figure out because things can change that can lead to changes in migration, as well as potentially life expectancy and fertility rate even. So population projections are not easy over in general, just in general terms. I mean, we can have all the statistics we want, but there are always things out there that could impact or change populations dynamics very, very quickly. One example, one projection may be based on what experts think is the lowest estimated fertility rate, and then the second might be the highest fertility rate. So it's just a matter of kind of figuring out what you gotta do. Multiple projections is what you're gonna need. You can't. There's just no one answer to this. The most likely prediction though is called the medium, and then the others are low and high variance. So you have the basic idea in the middle, and then you do the most extreme, and then you do the one on the other end to be able to compare and to have them kind of lined up side by side. Unless the experts are very, very wrong about their assumptions of future populations, are usually between the high and the low variance, and is most likely closer to the medium variance. But again, things can happen. For example, COVID would be something that is going to affect population, but we did not see and we're not able to predict. So population futures in the old core in the Eastern Europe. So the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IIASA, made a set of 9 population projections for the developing world based on varying combinations of fertility and life expectancy. And since the assumptions ranged from high to medium to low, as did life expectancy, there are 9 possible combinations. So there's 9 possible altogether. So we didn't talk about, but in the lecture that kind of separated out the world, if you looked at the different ways of looking at things, the developed nations are North America, Canada, the United States, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Virgin Islands, Europe and European parts of the former Soviet Union, as well as Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So these are what we considered developed nations. So we're going to focus on 2 projections specifically. The lowest projection is based on the assumption of a low fertility rate and a small increase in life expectancy, and the moderate projection is based on the assumption of a moderate fertility rate and a moderate increase, obviously. So if we look at the chart below, you see here, in 1995, the lowest projection was the same as the highest. 2020, which is this year, 1250 and 1340, and then 2050 is 1032, 1319, 607, and 1216. Now these numbers, we don't actually have these yet for 2020, but this was the lowest projection was 1250, so it'll be interesting to see at the end of the year where the numbers are going to fall in terms of the projection for this. So this is just a guess. I mean, when we went into this year, COVID, some people were saying that we were going to have a population explosion because of everyone in quarantine together. But now they're kind of rescinding that because a lot of people are finding out, especially with children, that perhaps they didn't want children, or they don't want more children, or those who don't have children are very solidifying that they do not want children. So it's going to be interesting to see where the population goes from here. So the fertility rate, when we look at the fertility rate, the life expectancy increase per decade is roughly 1 year, or the highest at 2 years, and this is our total fertility rate. Across 2000, which is the actual, 2030, 2035 projected, and 2080, 2085. So there is a rise in fertility rate, we shall see. Fertility rate, remember, refers to the age and time period a woman can be fertile to have children. So that's within that time frame. Life expectancy. So when we talked about life expectancy, there are impacts. There are various things that impact life expectancy. Medical science prolongs life. We are living much longer than we ever did before. But we don't know how fast these advances can be made. So, for example, we've been looking for a cure for cancer for many, many years, but we don't know exactly. So it can be difficult to make projections about this. And our lifestyles, pollution, all these things impact. So we don't actually know. Our life expectancy could drop suddenly for no particular reason, whereas right now it's fairly good, but we don't know what can happen in the future. A war, for example, could break out, and that would drop life expectancy. I think COVID, impacts of COVID, we don't know what's going to happen. You may get COVID, and then further down the road, that may actually drop your life expectancy because we don't have the data yet. So a lot of things can impact life expectancy very quickly. So carrying on with looking at population, something that is been a real issue is something called birth dearth. So there are implications towards this. And since the 1990s, instead of a population explosion, there's been a worry about a population implosion that could happen. And the challenge will come on how we handle a world where the population growth has been the norm, and now it's going to stop being the norm. There's going to be less population growth as opposed to when it was. There can be benefits, but there could also be a lot of social and economic chaos as well for this birth dearth. Now, what a birth dearth is exactly is it's a scarcity of births. That's what a dearth is, a scarcity or a lack of something. It's births. So there are 5 major implications, obviously, to less births for this. So the first, obviously, is family structures. There has been, over time, a drop in how many children in general people have, as opposed to 2 or 3 children. People are now having 1 or none children. It's becoming more and more commonly acceptable for couples to not have children, as opposed to having children. Because there is no younger population, there is a larger aging population being supported by fewer people. And this is a big deal because when you get to a certain age, the government then pays you to not work anymore. This is your pension or your retirement. And the problem is benefits are getting reduced every year for the elderly because there's just not enough money to go around, because there's not enough money being made by the working population. So benefits per person reduced, requiring more years working, paying less. Contributions to pensions have increased, and eligibility can be restricted based on income. So these things are all happening to the older generation just because there's not enough of the working class anymore to support them. We're also getting labor shortages. There's no one being born, so there's no one coming in to work. So you can see this is the predicted year. This year, again, it'll be interesting to see how these numbers match up. But in 1995, so these were actual labor shortages, and you can see all of them have gone up in terms of labor, and they're going up every year in terms of the labor shortages. And you can see North America specifically is going to be bad, which is where we are in Canada. The economic effects. Our economic health depends on our growth, and we grow for two reasons. We want money, and we want more stuff. And we are able to pay for that more stuff because we are able to work. Populations will continue to grow, and people want things. But once populations stop growing, people are perhaps not going to be buying as much anymore. So this can have a devastating effect on the economy as well. As the decline, economies are going to feel the pain of that. Wealth will continue to rise until there are problems with the supply in the environment. So it will impact us economically as well. A drastic shift in world power. We're actually seeing this already in terms of population in millions. The US is not the biggest country in the world anymore. Well, it hasn't been for a very long time. But anyway, India and China. There's a shift in the power balance. And we may be seeing this sooner than we thought, especially if you're watching issues right now in the news and on the US. The US has lost a lot of favor internationally and is starting to slip. Unless they get a new leader in there who's more with it than they're now. So are there any benefits to this birth death, to this lack of population? It is a danger, but fewer people have a lot of benefits, especially for the environment. Global warming will be reduced. Population density should go down. Fewer resources being used. So there's a lot of others out there. So environmentally, great. And if we can handle it well, this will actually probably increase the comfortability of people living in the time. More room, more space, more access to wealth, education, all those sorts of things. So why is this happening? So why is the fertility rate fallen? So why aren't people having kids anymore? So more education generally means fewer children. Women want to go to school. They don't want a baby. It's difficult to have a child and go to school at the same time. So a lot of them are putting it off or not having it all as they seek higher and higher education. A lot of women work outside the home. If you are a woman and you want to have a baby, you usually take a year off from your work. And a lot can happen in a year in your workplace, and you can fall behind. And a lot of women do feel like they fall behind in their workplace. Women work longer in their lives. In general, women live longer than men, and they tend to work longer. They want more control over their lives in more traditional societies. Sometimes having a baby is biological, and more women want control over that. Women are getting married later. They just wait longer in life to get married. They don't get married so young anymore. There's a huge divorce, and the divorce rate, if anyone's parents have been divorced or know anything about divorce, it can be increasingly unpleasant for everyone involved depending on the divorce and the people involved. So some kids aren't having children just because it is a little rough to have children and get a divorce. Some aren't even getting married. And then, of course, birth control. You choose when and how you're going to have a baby. So all these things are contributing to the birth dearth. Now, to counteract this, some governments have introduced some measures pronatalism. This basically means they're encouraging you to have a baby by giving tax deductions, credits, paying cheap daycare, that sort of thing, or encouraging immigration to the country. So that happens as well. And immigration, we will talk about in the next lecture. So that's it for population futures. Hope you learned a little something about the potential for future populations. And we will see you guys in the next lecture.